Every failed business has one thing in common: not poor execution, not bad timing, not insufficient funding or the wrong market or a team that could not hold together under pressure. Those things contribute, but underneath almost every business that launched with energy and conviction and genuine belief and still failed, underneath all of it, is the same quiet truth. Nobody actually needed it. The founder needed it to exist. The founder believed in it completely, worked for it tirelessly, sacrificed real things to build it. But the market, the actual human beings who were supposed to hand over their money in exchange for the thing, did not need it. They did not have the problem it solved. Or the problem it solved was so minor, so infrequently experienced, so easily managed without any external solution, that when the product arrived they looked at it with polite indifference and kept walking. The most expensive mistake in entrepreneurship is falling in love with an idea before you have confirmed that the idea solves a real problem for real people in a real and persistent way. Randy made this mistake. Twice. Before a frustration he witnessed in a university library on a Tuesday afternoon in November showed him the question he had been failing to ask. Stay with us, because today we are telling the story of Randy, a man who spent 2 years building things nobody needed before he finally understood what building something people actually need requires. And if stories like this one matter to you, subscribe, because somebody out there needs to hear exactly this today. Randy was 26 years old and had wanted to be an entrepreneur since before he knew what the word meant. Not for the money, or not only for the money. For the thing underneath the money that entrepreneurship represented to him from a young age. The autonomy. The authorship, the particular satisfaction of building something from nothing and having it exist in the world because you decided it should. He had grown up watching his father work a job that paid adequately and demanded everything, and returned very little of the thing that made work feel worthwhile. Randy had decided early that his story would be different. By 26, he had launched 2 businesses. The first was a premium notebook brand. Randy loved notebooks. The physical, tactile pleasure of good paper and a well-made binding. He had spent more money than was reasonable on notebooks from specialty retailers and had concluded, with the logic of a person who loves something and assumes the love is universal, that there was a market of people exactly like him waiting for a better option at a slightly lower price point. He had spent 4 months designing the product, 3 months finding a manufacturer, 2 months building a website, and approximately 6 weeks discovering that the people he had assumed were waiting for his notebooks were not, in any commercially meaningful number, actually waiting. The notebooks were good. The market was indifferent. He had not asked the right question before he started. He had not asked whether there was a real, felt, frequently experienced frustration with existing notebooks that his product specifically addressed. He had asked only whether he personally wanted the product, and had treated his own desire as sufficient evidence of demand. The second business was a productivity app. This one had felt more considered. Randy had done research. He had read articles about the productivity software market, had looked at competitor products, had convinced himself that the existing options were overcomplicated, and that a simpler, cleaner version would find an audience among users who were overwhelmed by feature-heavy alternatives. He had spent 7 months building it with a developer friend, launched it, and discovered that the users who were overwhelmed by feature-heavy alternatives were not overwhelmed enough to switch. They had already learned their tools. The friction of learning something new outweighed the mild preference for something simpler. Again, not a bad idea, not a real problem. He had been in love with the solution before he had confirmed the problem was serious enough to justify it. By the time November arrived, Randy was 26, 2 ventures lighter, and sitting in the university library near his apartment, not as a student, just as someone who needed a quiet place to think that was not his flat. He had been coming here for weeks. It was free, it was quiet, and it had reliable Wi-Fi, which was more than could be said for the coffee shop 2 streets over that had become unusable during the day. He was sitting at a table near the entrance trying to work through the outline of what he was already beginning to call, privately, his third idea, a meal planning service for young professionals, when the doors opened and a group of students came in. They were, visibly, in the particular state of stress that exam season produces in people who have not yet learned to pace themselves across a semester. Heavy bags, tired faces, the focused desperation of people who needed to sit down and work and were now confronting the reality that the library was full. Every table occupied. Every quiet corner claimed. Randy watched them do the calculation he recognized from his own recent weeks of coming here, the assessment of options, the quiet frustration, the eventual dispersal toward alternatives that were clearly less suitable. One student sat on the floor near the periodicals. 2 others left entirely. He watched this happen and felt the thing that he had never felt about the notebooks or the productivity app, not the excitement of a solution, but the discomfort of a problem. A real, visible, physically present frustration being experienced by real people right in front of him. Students needed somewhere to study. The library was full. Coffee shops were noisy and increasingly expensive to occupy for long periods. The university had not built enough study infrastructure to match its enrollment growth. And this was not an exam week anomaly. Randy had been watching the library fill to capacity and turn people away for weeks. He pulled out his notebook, one of the unsold ones, fittingly, and wrote one question at the top of the page. What problem does this actually solve? He had never written that question before either of his previous ventures. He had started with the solution both times, the notebook, the app, and worked backwards toward a justification. He had never started with a problem and worked forward toward a solution that addressed it specifically and necessarily. He spent the next 2 weeks not building anything. He talked to students, not a formal survey, just conversations. In the library queue, in the corridors, in the coffee shop where people went when the library was full. He asked one question consistently: where do you study when the library is full, and how does that affect your work? The answers were more consistent than he had expected. Students were losing hours every week to the problem of finding adequate study space during peak periods. Some were traveling significant distances to find alternatives. Some were simply going home to environments that were less conducive to focused work. The frustration was real, it was frequent, and nobody had solved it locally. Randy had found his problem. What followed was the most different development process he had experienced. Instead of designing a solution he loved and hoping people would use it, he designed around the specific friction the students had described. A platform that mapped available study spaces across the city, not just university facilities, but cafes, libraries, co-working spaces, with real-time availability, noise level ratings, Wi-Fi reliability scores, and the ability to book a seat where booking was possible. It was not a novel concept in the abstract, but it was a precise solution to a specific, confirmed, frequently experienced problem in a specific place, and that specificity was everything. The first version was rough. Randy knew it, but the students who used it during the exam period that followed did not care about rough. They cared about finding somewhere to sit and work. And the platform, imperfect as it was, solved that problem reliably enough that word spread faster than any marketing Randy had done for either of his previous businesses. Within one exam season, he had 3,000 users. Within 6 months, he was in conversations with 2 other universities about expanding the platform to their cities. He had not built a better product. He had finally built a necessary one. The most successful entrepreneurs are not the ones with the most creative ideas. They are the ones who become obsessed with problems before they fall in love with solutions, who spend more time confirming that a frustration is real, persistent, and widely shared than they spend designing the thing that addresses it, who ask not just whether they personally want the product to exist, but whether the people they are building it for are experiencing a pain that no existing solution is adequately resolving. The question is not, is this a good idea? The question is, what real problem does this solve? For whom, how often, and badly enough that they would pay to have it fixed. Randy built 2 things nobody needed before he learned to ask that question. The third thing he built, the thing that started with a problem witnessed rather than a solution imagined, is the one that grew. Fall in love with the problem. The right solution will follow. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.